Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you here at this GreenFleet Roundtable event here at the very impressive, I hope you'll agree, Duxford Imperial War Museum. It's great to see so many people here.
There are people who are very much on your side, ready to help this transition, and I'm really here to listen and learn about all the issues that you're having and hopefully find some solutions.
I'm Naomi, I'm Managing Director for England's Economic Heartland, which is one of the two subnational transport bodies for the kind of wider East. Transport East covers the sort of Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex area, and England's Economic Heartland covers from Cambridgeshire all the way over to Swindon and Hertfordshire up to Northamptonshire, so we have a big geography. We're formed as a partnership between local authorities and the Department for Transport, funded quite significantly by DFT, with an aspiration that we look at how the regions that we look after are working with businesses, with the private sector, but also with government and local government to achieve transport outcomes that are relevant, set by our partners. In terms of the East of England, carbon emissions in the East of England are well above the national average from transport. 42% of carbon emissions come from transport in the East of England compared to a national average of 28%. It's quite stark, and there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, we have quite a lot of rural areas and relatively small major urban centres. That one of the things that keeps coming up as we talk with MPs, etc., about this issue is the fact that actually the need for us to work better with the energy supply chain is really, really important. It's such a huge barrier, and it's almost a systems thing that we've got to get right to kind of address that. So it's something that we're working quite hard on to make sure that we can kind of plan the right grid supply, and where there are big barriers to grid supply, we've got a mechanism for escalating that, and I'm not convinced we've got that right at all yet.
I think there's too much silo working, too many barriers.
Yeah.
You'll go to one person, I've been on this journey, I've even tried getting some of the funding as a local authority, and a nightmare just to get the funding and grants and everything else. So many barriers, even if you do it properly and follow all their guidelines, it's dreadful.
Our experience of working with the local authorities in our region is that they are individually thinking about what they need to do to get an electric vehicle infrastructure strategy. And some of that is about the skills in the local authorities to be able to do that. It's quite different from what perhaps conventional transport planners would do. And we don't have a suite of people that are just ready to step into this space to write these strategies. Each individual authority is thinking about procurement on their own, and I think that's something that we're really keen to try and encourage them to work collectively on. So in each case, the procurement strategies are slightly different, which causes a real difficulty for suppliers.
My ask, if I may, is that there must be a coordinated and consistent approach across local authorities, because our experience, this mismatched hodgepodge of different approaches by local authorities, frankly, is a recipe for chaos. If we're going to make this work, and just to put another perspective on this, I mean, here in Cambridge, City of Cambridge, have been consulting, for example, on introducing a zero emission zone from 2025. Well, hello, that's just not realistic, because we don't have the infrastructure in place. And it really worries me that some of these local authorities, another one was Bath, I've had a real battle with Bath, because they wanted to start charging diesel lorries going into their city to incentivise a switch to zero emission from this summer. And I thought, well, the evidence base, you haven't looked at the evidence base. The infrastructure is not there. This is just not realistic. So I'm hoping that those are outliers that can be brought in and sort of coordinated in a way so that we're all on the same page, we're on the same trajectory in terms of what the end goal is, and we're working together rather than unilaterally to achieve that goal. because I have to say my experience thus far has been really quite negative, dealing with some of the local authorities, I have to say.
Can I come back on that point, if that's all right? Okay. Has it worked? So, for example, Birmingham has a low emission zone.
Yeah.
Are there any local authorities that you've experienced this successfully working? Because I think the counter is the challenge for local authorities is how, if you've got to get all the ducks in order to get these things right, we will never get there.
I've currently done some cost analysis because I've got a couple of sort of cage tipper vehicles, and when I was doing the cost analysis on the operational costs of diesel v electric, when you consider the congestion zone charges daily, it actually works out around £5,000 and less per year to operate the electric vehicle, based on average sort of 15,000 miles a year, because the rounds that they do are not particularly far distance, you know. And it was surprising that it was worked out, although the initial outlay for the vehicle was more, you know, almost potentially close to double for the cost of the vehicle, that over the cost of a year, the lease or owning the vehicle was so much cheaper because those you're saving on those.
And you also need to trial it with the charging infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that's why you need a period of time, isn't it? Not a day.
Yeah.
And as Dean was saying, there's some very good DC charging infrastructure which Vital do, which will plug directly into your three-phase supply and a mobile unit, so you can decide, you know, do we need it in this workshop or do we need it over in this depot?
Yeah, so Chris Ashley from the Road Haulage Association. We're a trade body representing predominantly HGV operators, and we have over 8,500 members, but we also have an increasing coach membership. My role is as policy lead on the environment, so it is to address the question that we've all been articulating, which is how do we make the switch away from diesel to the brave new world of electric or hydrogen heavy duty vehicles. Really fascinated to hear all the experiences from colleagues around the table, because there's so many points that resonate with me. Let me sort of give you the RHA's perspective and sort of starting point, if you will. In a sense, I feel as though, as a trade body, sort of, you know, sitting somewhat above all this activity, is about balancing the ambition. Of course, you know, we're all committed and signed up to achieving net zero, but it's balancing that ambition with the realities that we're all facing, you know, of just running an economy.
So Vital EV Solutions is, in simple terms, a provider of sales and service for DC charging infrastructure. So we were born from a company called Vital Power, who would provide uninterruptible power supplies to users that wanted it, which is effectively provision of generators to supermarkets, the NHS, government organisations, etc. And they were doing that from 2015. In 2019, they started getting asked questions about charging infrastructure and could we support charging. And they looked at the market and thought that the AC market had already gone down the route of kind of wall boxes and home installs, and that really wasn't something that we wanted to get into. But our business model lent itself to providing support and service around the DC charging infrastructure being installed, because it kind of replicated that generator model in some way. We had engineering teams in place across the business that could transition their skills to EV. So what was born was Vital EV in 2019, which is effectively providing, through our engineers, you know, surveys for customers, you know, advice and guidance on what they can have on their sites. It's the first step we go to. If someone wants to put some DC charging infrastructure in place, we'll go and do a site survey and determine what's possible. They'll make recommendations following that, but if everything is good to go, then we can obviously help. We'll do the install, we'll do the commissioning, testing, provision of the hardware, and then the service and maintenance of that hardware subsequently. But also, to give some scale on Vital, we've got around 2,000 connections out in the marketplace. And these are with councils, they're with bus depots, they're with extreme sports companies, all sorts of organisations have taken the DC charging where they've got that need for that rapid charge. And I think 2,000 connections is testament to the great work the business has done up to now. And if you compared us to a kind of public charging point operator, we're kind of top 10 in terms of size and scale.
We've got 90 vehicles, about 9 are EV at the moment, and I've got another 5 on order due this summer, and probably another 3 or 4 due to be placed this year. 50% of our fleet are LGVs, so all our EVs are either small vans or we should get our first transit van during the summer. Our problem is every small van we take out saves a tonne and a half or 2 tonnes of CO2. Each refuse collection vehicle adds 35 tonnes, really. So that is one of our big challenges. We've got 2 depots and both haven't got the electrical infrastructure for charging large vehicles at the moment. Our main depot should have a new incomer which would take us from 100 kVA to 500 kVA later this year. And our other depot in Vista, we are moving to a new site which should have a much bigger incomer. It'll be at least 250, but we've also got an awful lot of building space for a bigger solar panel array.
But when we move over to all our large vehicles, being electric or whether they'll be in due course, the problem then is every fire station only takes in as much electric as a large domestic house. So we can't put 150 watt chargers at every station. We've got one at Hammersmith at the moment, one at our workshops at Ruislip, but that's all we've got. To actually put a substation in is like £500,000. We can't use when we're in central London, all the electric's taken up, and it's just a headache for us.
We've got solutions with the Kempower kit where effectively we'll install a power cabinet. We call it affectionately the fridge freezer, which goes and stands aside a car park, and that can be built up to a single unit can have 200 kilowatts. You can have a double with 400 or a triple with 600, and any single cabinet can feed 8 connectors. So with the satellite units that come off that, the really good way this works in, for example, in a bus depot, is you can put the unit with the power out of the way, and the satellite stand on an A4 footprint with 2 connectors that allow lots of movement within the depot still, because I think you'll all agree your bus depots were not really built for charging vehicles and running in and out, they're built for storing. So these can be laid out in a really effective way to ensure movement within the depot and flexibility on the charging. One of the things we haven't covered is funding of the kit that I'd be interested to know if anyone's done that with anybody else, or if that's something they feel would be of benefit. Something that we're looking at providing. But I just wanted to check in really. Are we barking up the wrong one? Or is it something that could be viable? I mean, it feels like there's an expense to put in fueling infrastructure that people haven't had to do before. And I think we see that with the DC charging, it's a big step from AC. So your AC stuff is a grand for a piece of kit, and then your electrician fitment costs. But the DC world for our movable charger is kind of 16 to 18 grand. Then you start moving up towards fixed kit, and you're looking at 30, 40,000 plus some groundworks, etc., etc. And yeah, we just thought there's scope for funding.
I think with kind of like contract hire, vehicles, contract hire in charge.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
In the last 3 months, things have moved on massively for trucks, and so keeping up with the developments, available vehicles and demands is something that I guess we're all going to learn as we go a bit. but collaboration, and I can't reinforce enough that collaboration piece about sharing is the only way we're going to do it as fast as we can, and that still probably won't be quite as fast as we'd like. But I think it comes back around and reinforces the collaboration point, because actually where you've got multiple opportunities for different user types to utilise a venue for charging, that would be the very best way of doing this, in terms of it would best cover the investment that there is required to develop the facility and pay for the connection. It sees that utilised for as broad a part of the day as possible. So, I mean, my experience more recently is bus depots. A lot of charging has gone into London, charging infrastructure has gone into London. It is probably a quarter of the day that it's used. And so for 16 hours of the day, there is a whole lot of infrastructure there, and all that's happening at that depot is kettles are being boiled every now and again, and the hot water tank is being topped up. And at night, it's absolutely rammed to peak, because they're trying to fill up 30, 40, 60, 80 buses in a 6-hour window. And so looking at how those facilities can be shared with third party, in different scenarios at different points in the day, week, month, I think is really quite key to getting as much.
I wonder, that's something I'd like to know, Kate, from everybody, about how realistic it is to share your depots, your charging infrastructure with others, because to sweat those assets and actually earn an income makes logical sense once you've invested. But how realistic is it? I mean, say for you, Clyde.
It has to be charged 24/7, maybe. It could be a charge.
Just that flexibility piece. People need to know when they use it, when they want it. If it's quick like that, like the bus, it's quite straightforward. You know when you use it, it's going to be certain hours. And it's about people being open and transparent with like-minded companies who are in the same, at least engaged.
That's the point. It's finding the right ones. Yeah, it comes down to more health and safety and insurance. You can't come on our site. Is this going to be the bigger problem?
That's what we've got. Our operational depot in London is near one of your fire stations up Thames Street. We could share the diesel, and we do Pan London sharing our diesel, because it's all outside on the road as they come in. But for our operational, for charging, we wouldn't be able to do it. Number one, for security and health and safety. The only thing that we've looked at is people like Bywaters or someone like that comes into our depot at Tip, that they could go into one of the bays and do it, but we wouldn't allow just anyone to come in.
If you were operating in London and you wanted to charge in the middle of the day, then parking your lorry at a bus station for an hour while the driver's on his break now and his lunch is not a daft idea.
Charge because I have stopped, not I have to stop because I need to charge.
Something that's always been in the back of my mind, we're talking about plugging in all the while, the time it takes and the infrastructure. I see the future, we've got an awful lot of redundant petrol stations, filling stations, because they're not going to be supplying diesel, petrol or whatever. If they were then repurposed as a charging point, and they could have their own wind turbine, their own solar farm attached to them, and rather than having to plug in, if, like my battery drill, we actually had something the size of a suitcase that was the actual battery pack, so that you drove in there, it could actually be mechanised, so there's no manual handling, the guy doesn't have to lift it in and out, but I reverse in, my back bumper flips up, it pulls my battery pack out, sorts a new one in, £30, sir, there you go, whoopie-doo. Wouldn't that solve all our problems?
I've written to our generation similar, particularly around the departmental targets, the Road to Zero targets for departments internally. And I need to change them again actually, because it's key for 3 years earlier. The market is changing, but the supply just isn't there. And we talked about exemptions very early on in the process, and there hasn't been anything forthcoming from OZEV, so that's something that I really need to explore with them really if possible.
Our position is, yes, we support net zero, but we're also clear that exemptions may be necessary to those dates to cater for, I think, sort of some of the realities that we've been hearing about. And our starting overview is that, and we've made it very clear in our submissions to government, the entire United Kingdom has to be catered for, that all economic sectors within the UK have to be catered for, and geographic areas, so that includes our rural and remote areas, but also economic sectors like the quarries and the forests. How do we get the aggregate out, for example, to service the building industry, for example.
I think also, unless you guys are giving your intent about what you want, they don't get built. We already know that we've got right-hand drive vehicles that are not going to be coming. Tesla's saying no more right-hand drive, no less than Model X. So your intent needs to be known for them to build these vehicles for the UK market. I think that's quite important.
We are a curbside management solution, shall we say. We have a bookable platform that allows last mile logistics fleets to book curbside spaces in advance so they can get closer to where they need to do their work first time, so it's a guaranteed space. So we work with local authorities who want to operate their networks, their curbside in different ways, and then provide the booking platform to allow fleets to advance book a slot to enable them to get to their curbside space, and do the job that they're needing to do. We got the benefits of that, I think, for the curb owners, the local authorities. I think you've got some social, environmental, and also it's a new revenue stream for them as well, which I think they all seem to be very happy about. And then obviously for the curb users, the freight servicing and delivery fleets. Again, if you're driving less miles, obviously you're using less emissions, you can get more done. And also, if you book something and we're also integrated with all the enforcement teams through the local authorities, you don't get any tickets. So of course that's a saving, which obviously, as we're talking about electric fleets, you can offset all those lovely savings, the operational savings to upgrade your fleet. I appreciate it might not be enough when you're talking about £500,000 a vehicle.
I'm Andrew White. I'm Head of New Business for the Northern Scotland for Tusker. So a slightly different position to most of you in that we're a provider of these schemes. I've been with business 12 years. We've been providing the salary sacrifice schemes though for 15 years now. And we've got approximately 1,600 customers in corporate, NHS, local authority, public sector, literally from Aberdeen to the Isles of Scilly. And we've put over 100,000 cars through the scheme in that time. So we've built up a lot of experience. And interesting, it's always been a green car scheme. So from day one, we've always run a carbon offset program. So the lower, in 2008, a low emission car was sub 120 grams, which is sort of hilarious today, but that's what they were. So you had diesels and petrol cars back then, which were classed as ultra low emission. Of course, over the years, that's changed, and with the huge incentives that were put in place for ultra low emission electric vehicles, there's been a step change in the growth of the salary sacrifice car schemes, because they are an incredibly cost-effective way for people to get into these cars. And we've seen literally record growth in the last couple of years.
We've got all the Mayor of London's ULEZ coming in, in between the M25, and we're offering our staff need to get to work. And a lot of our station, you can't just drive, you can't get training. Buses times a day, they'll be there at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but the trains don't start till 7. So a lot want to bring their own cars in. So we're looking at the salary sacrifice scheme for electric cars, but that hasn't come in yet. So when that comes in, we've got to try and charge our fleet of stations, people to have private cars to actually get to and from work.
So yeah, that's really where I'm at. I've also been in discussion with Tusker and a couple of similar operators about introducing the salary sacrifice scheme for our employees, as I think it's a fantastic thing that we should offer. So yeah, I haven't had the sign off by the board yet, but I've certainly sent them a few proposals on it. So.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution today. It's really been a great conversation, many points made. I can't promise they will all be written up in the magazine, but I'll do my best to accurately reflect the conversations that we've had today. So, and please feel free to join us for another roundtable event, maybe later on in the year or next year. You can always reach out to George if you're happy to participate.